Everybody, welcome back to the Golf Fitness Mastermind. We are hosting our second roundtable discussion tonight, and we are going to talk all about how to develop power in your golf swing. If you guys were able to watch the first recording that we did last month, we talked about unstable surface training, which is a little bit of a nice tangent into tonight's topic, because in the first talk, we talked about how unstable surface training doesn't really produce quality power output and force production. So tonight we're going to teach you guys the best methods and strategies that we like to enhance your power in your golf game. And obviously a lot of those strategies are going to be things that you can do in the gym. So we're going to keep it open-ended tonight. Me and the rest of the mastermind guys are just going to bounce ideas and thoughts that we have off of one another. We're going to keep it super informal and just give you guys as much tactical information as you can to say, hey, this is what I'm going to work on tomorrow in the gym and throughout the winter and the off season to build power in your swing. Because let's face it, we all want to hit it further. We all want to swing faster, and we could help you get some of those things going. All right. So again, guys, welcome to the call. Welcome to say hi to the mastermind group. This is us. This is part of us. Some guys can't be on the call. Some girls can't be on the call. But we get together each month, multiple times, just to provide as much education and value for you guys in terms of the best ways to train for your golf fitness. All right, so let's get it growing. Let's kick it off. Again, we're going to talk about how to develop power in your golf swing. And the one thing that I just kind of want to start off, because I think it's so important, is just understanding the simple premise that when you train, you have to train for power. I think a lot of people just tend to neglect that aspect of it, and they just think, hey, I'm doing a regular workouts and therefore I should build speed and get faster. Now, if you go from doing nothing to lifting weights, yes, you might see some incremental gains and certain things like that. But for a lot of us, all of us here, like some of us work with very high level players, but even not, like just everyone wants more power. So everyone has to train for it. And what that training is for power can be very different depending on the client. So keep that in mind as we go through tonight's call. And we talk about that you actually have to go about doing things in the gym that you want to replicate that's going to lead to more power and more distance on the golf course. So let's kind of bounce it around. What do you guys think? What are your kind of go-tos, first things, biggest advice that you would give the audience when it comes to how to train for power in their golf swing?
Guys, do you think we should maybe start with the prerequisites? Obviously, mobility, stability, leading into strength, and obviously going to power, and
absolutely
start there.
Sure, go ahead, Nathan. Break it down.
I mean, obviously, we're looking at prerequisites for power, making sure you have mobility and stability, adequate joint mobility and range of motion, and then from there, training some strength, and then obviously we're going to get into how we take that strength that you build and transition into power. But yeah, I just know from my clientele, the people I see in the gym, that they're always coming in. Maybe they see a video on social media about how to achieve greater power, and all of a sudden they're throwing medicine balls or doing plyometrics. And actually just today at the country club, somebody was doing clean and jerks, and let's just say they shouldn't have been doing anything. So I mean, I had to kind of walk up to them and kind of back them up a little bit and say, until we get some shoulder range of motion, blah, 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 we really, this is not a part of your repertoire. But I just want to make sure that we emphasize the importance of, joint function first.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because like we said, we can dive into what training for power looks like in the gym. But as you perfectly highlighted, a lot of people aren't there yet, right? And it's our job to say, hey, listen, this is where you need to start. It all starts with mobility. Mobility is king. We'd always speak to that. So yes, absolutely, we want to build that pyramid, having the mobility, stability, strength, and that little tippy top piece. That's when the power development comes into play. So that's a perfect way to start it.
And I think it's important to say that power exercises are not the only way to gain distance, right? Like a lot of people come in and they're like, okay, when can we get past all this stuff so that we can start working on medicine balls and clean and jerks or whatever, so that I can start hitting it further. And I always have to tell people, like, based on what you need, doing those things are going to get you more distance, right? Like I've had people gain distance in 2 weeks just doing stretching, because they're getting into better ranges, better positions, more ranges of motion, increasing their X factor stretch, all that stuff. So when we're talking about power, usually we're talking about the end result of gaining distance, but just kind of want to back up and be like, well, power exercises are not the only way to gain distance. It's sort of after you have all this stuff, the icing on the cake, like you were talking about.
Absolutely. Well said.
I think it's important for us. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead, Jonathan.
No, Darren, go ahead. That was me.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think it's important for us to understand, I think, what the golfer is doing to create the power. if they're swinging a driver at 100 miles an hour, but their ball speed's only 130, obviously they're not making solid enough contact. And if we're missing that data, then that could be something that we could communicate, that say, hey, we need to optimize that, whether it's technique or club fitting, knowing where to send them, but being able to communicate that to the player. It might not be something that they know right off the bat, and you're searching for power when you can easily get it with more solid contact. I think that's probably the easiest way to get it. And they'd be really happy if you can kind of push them in the right direction, on top of building stability, mobility in the right areas, and then just identifying what areas are problematic, whether it's with 3D data or a really good solid evaluation.
I guess
Is
we
that
can.
why you have the kinematic sequence behind you?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
You are on point with your background game. That is for sure.
I have to choose it wisely, man.
I love it.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that maybe the first place to start is to go to a professional and kind of get an assessment done. And because there's a lot of different ways to improve club head speed. Just on the fitness standpoint, like Darren was talking about, there's, centerness of contact and equipment and instruction, but just from a fitness standpoint, like Ryan said, maybe you need more mobility, or maybe you do need more strength, or maybe you do need to truly focus on creating more speed and doing those type of exercises. But if you don't know where your areas of weakness are, where your biggest opportunities for improvement are, and you don't have someone kind of point you in the right direction, you could be going down the wrong road. You could be going down a road that could lead to injury, and ultimately, do more harm than good. So maybe probably the first step for most people would be to speak to someone that can assess where you currently are, where your biggest areas of opportunity are, and then kind of point you in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, nobody likes doing what they're bad at, right? But usually what you're bad at is what you need the most.
Amen to that. Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
And as everyone's saying so far, we clearly have identified, us all being the fitness side of things, that we're very open and honest and realistic that there are other ways to build power, other ways to build speed, kinematic sequences, right? Club head speed, hitting the ball in the center of the club face. I could probably work on that, right? So yes, I think we all understand that. Obviously, with our expertise, we're going to focus more on that side in terms of what we can do in the gym, whether it's the building block stuff with the mobility or the fancy jumping power med ball throw exercises. There's a very large spectrum, and we need to identify where our client or our customer, whatever the hell you want to call it, where's their starting point and what can they do to get the quickest win, right? To get the initial buy-in, but then also say, like you said, Kirk, like, this is where you need to go, right? Try this road, get the right clubs, do this, do that. And all of that eventually comes together into a nice, well-rounded approach, whether it's something where they're working with us, a medical professional, a swing coach. There are a lot of different tracks that people can take to get that desired outcome. So what else we got? What other, let's stick to our expertise for a quick second. Let's go fitness route. What other variables do you think are at play that we would teach somebody or coach someone through when it comes to generating power? Nothing? Come on, this is when we're supposed to talk.
I start a lot with the feet. So we've got a body track. So we're looking at the feet, and what's the vertical pressure? I think a lot of amateurs tend to just kind of float on top. Daisy be perfect for this too. If she was on the call, but pushing into the ground is critical. And there's a linear relationship between that and club head speed. So if we're just floating on top of the ground and not applying any additional percent of our body weight into the ground, then club head speed is going to lack. So even understanding some of the forces at play there can improve things.
Darren, go into that a little bit more if you don't mind, because I think a lot of people, like the general golf fitness audience, right? They might see someone like Rory or Justin Thomas and think, oh, they're jumping off the ground, right? They're doing this, right? But go into the ground reaction force and what's really happening to make those guys move their feet so much.
Right. So if you look at a professional, there's a lot of really general things that go on. So at setup with an iron, say they've got 60% of their pressure on their trail foot, their right side for a right-hander. And their backswing, they're going to get that to about 75 to 80. And then when they transition, you're going to see that center of pressure ideally shoot across over to the left side, which means they're pushing down into that left foot really hard, whether it's through the toe or the heel, kind of depends on the shot shape that they're wanting to produce. But if you look at Justin Thomas, this was a couple of years ago, I don't know if his numbers are still as high, but Body Track was saying that he was 1.84 times his body weight into the ground when that lead foot was maximally pushing. Now that caused him to do this kind of fallback look on the force plate data, but for a guy that's maybe 160 pounds, to hit it as far as he does, that's a heck of a lot of club head speed for a generally small body. Where if you look at on the women's side, like Alexi Thompson, where she gets this kind of jumping motion and her follow through looks maybe just a little bit different than everyone else's, but she creates a heck of a lot of speed compared to a lot of the other women on tour. So it makes her more competitive, and she's hitting shorter irons into greens when other girls are hitting hybrids.
Yeah, I just think that's such an important thing for people to understand is they're not just randomly jumping off the floor, right? They're transitioning their weight into their lead side, and they're pushing so hard into the ground that the ground pushes back into them, which causes a lot of that rotational component in the golf swing. I think a lot of people don't get that, or they might hear the word, oh, they're jumping off the floor, and kind of misinterpret how much pressure these guys are putting down into the ground, which, as we know, when you put force down into the ground, it pushes back up into you. So that is a huge component that I think often gets overlooked or doesn't really get explained very well to the regular average golfer. So thank you for touching on that.
Yeah, which is just to tie it back into last time, which is what we discussed last time, because
Perfect.
Unstable surfaces,
Perfect.
right? You lose the ground reaction force.
Perfect.
That we're all talking about. So yeah, that's why it's important to, increase your foot function, one, but increase your ability to use the ground, the flat ground, because unstable surfaces aren't going to give you that ground reaction force that push back against you to generate force and power.
Awesome.
Right.
Beautiful.
Hey,
I'll
Darren, I got a
actually
quick
Sorry.
Good, Jonathan.
I was just gonna say, do you see like a correlation between like whenever you check for vertical jump, the guys who jump the highest, do you normally see that translate onto the vertical, like onto the force plate, or is some of that like motor control also like where they have like a misconnection, or like they're not jumping and they're not producing all that force that they're generating?
Yeah, so I'll measure the vert, and then I'll also measure like what percentage of body weight they're putting into the ground. So even for the people that are just floating, they can produce upwards of over 2 times their body weight into the ground during that vertical right before takeoff. So I'll look at that concentric phase, and then also look at the eccentric phase on the way down. And ideally, I'd like to see that eccentric phase lower than the concentric phase. So if they're able to load properly when they're landing, then it shows me that they've got good motor control. Sometimes that's more coaching. But anyways, that at least gives me a ceiling on what I can say, okay, this is the max that you could create during the golf swing. And then let's try to fill in the gaps of what you're doing now and then what that ceiling is.
I think there's another tie-in right there in terms of, Jonathan, you mentioned vertical jump, right? Another component of power is we need to be able to control it. And one thing I like to say to people is, okay, you want to produce all this power and all this speed. What's the first thing you would do if I ask you to jump as high as you can? You'd go down, right? You'd squat down. There's a preload, there's a stretch. We all know, if you push a coil or something in really tight in a spring, what does it do? It shoots out further. So the ability to control and harness the deceleration phase of a movement, as we're coaching people in the gym, produces more power. Everyone we talked about before wants to skip ahead and do the fancy fun power exercises. But if you don't have the braking system, like we all like to say, if you don't have that deceleration and control, you're not going to be able to produce as much force as you can, right? I know, Nathan, you just did a post on this a couple days ago, right?
Yeah, same thing. You got to make sure you're building that resilient tissue, not just
Right.
from a power perspective, but also from an injury prevention perspective as well.
Right, right. One of my favorite sayings, right? You can't shoot a cannon out of a canoe, right? Charlie Wangara's saying. So if you don't have that stable base, if you don't have the ability to decelerate and control a specific movement, you can't produce that force or the maximum force that you could produce. So yeah, if you're going to do a vertical jump, the first thing you do is squat down. Same thing in the gym. Build that eccentric control. Like Darren was talking about, have the ability to harness and kind of manifest as much power as you can. So when it's time to produce that output of force, you have everything working for you.
Yeah, I think back, kind of taking a step back, the linking this all together is the other sources of power in the golf swing, right? I mean, we talked about vertical, obviously, but the horizontal, the chop, forearm, wrist release. But we can talk about that. But no matter which power source we're going after, we still need to make sure we have a braking system for each one. Maybe not forearm and wrist, maybe so. But in terms of like chop, horizontal, and vertical, obviously, definitely need a braking system in place for those.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do we need one for the wrist? That's a good question.
I don't know.
I don't know. Probably a little bit, right?
I would think there's something there.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's a big problem, especially with the LPGA players I work with, is they have a lot more wrist and elbow and shoulder problems than the guys do. I think it's probably has to do with more joint laxity, but I know that's a big issue, especially on the junior and female side.
Just hypermobility, joint milk.
I wouldn't call it hypermobility, but I think it's a lack of strength and stability in those joints up the arm.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, you could call that a braking system, obviously, but yeah, I think the guys tend to be a little bit tighter, and so it's not as big of an issue. But when you are more mobile, like the juniors and the females, then you need that quote unquote braking system or that joint stability up the arm, especially. I don't know if you guys see that in your kind of higher level or female golfers where they just struggle more with like wrist and elbow issues.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't train any. I just have competitive junior women players, so not older. But that's a good point. What are some of the things that you do to lock in that extra stability? Are you doing like crawling patterns? Are you doing things that have their extremities engaged with the floor, or what types of things are you doing?
I mean, mostly just like grip work and dynamic shoulder stability. A lot of times, they'll come in with pre-existing wrist problems or whatever, so being on the floor in that position isn't super comfortable. But I mean, we use some of that for stretching, rocking with the hands on the floor and things like that. We're getting a little bit away from power now, but just the topic of wrist braking systems made me kind of think of that.
Hey man, we're all known to geek out and go down crazy tangents, so it's all good.
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately I haven't run into too many people with big wrist or shoulder issues, but in the women and the juniors that we do have, building some braking and building some strength is more of a focus with that group because that seems to be an area of need.
Yeah.
Sure. Makes sense. All right, so how about this one? How about we actually transition into what are our favorite power exercises? What are things that we're going to use to say, okay, we kind of have that foundation, we have this ability, we have the prerequisites, let's get after it. What are some things that we're doing in the gym?
All right, so we're ruling out traditional strength exercises in this segment. Is that?
For this particular segment, given the fact that we know that those can have benefits, yes, let's get a little fancy with it. Let's give some people like, hey, these would be more like the tip of the iceberg, higher level things that you could work up to. All right, kettlebell swings. All right, we'll say kettlebell swing. Big fan of swings. Obviously, prerequisite movement there. We need to be able to hip hinge. We need to be able to deadlift. We know that. Okay, if we're going to act on that presumption and kettlebell swing is often probably one of the most butchered exercises in the gym, right? We probably agree with that. We see so many people squatting it and lifting with their arms or doing that godforsaken CrossFit thing, whatever that is. But, dominant, posterior dominant, hip hinge, ballistic movement. That's one of the best things you can do for your golf swing to build strength in your glutes. Ton of prerequisites that you need to get there, but if you can get to the point where you're swinging effectively, it's going to be a huge bang for your buck exercise. So that's definitely one for me.
I think, kind of touching on that again is like a lot of the power exercises, whether it's kettlebell swings, Olympic lifting, med ball throws, plyometrics, I think they're probably the most butchered exercises in the gym because people don't have those prerequisites. Now, we already talked about that, obviously, but like,
Absolutely.
with medicine ball throws, we're not throwing it hard enough. We have no intent. We're not getting our hips started. We're getting faster, but, we're kind of messing up our kinematic sequence a little bit. With plyometrics, we're jumping way too far ahead before skipping and bounding and depth jumps and things like that. We're doing hip flexion exercises to try to beat, a YouTube Guinness Book of World Records of how many, plow boxes you can jump over. It looks pretty, but is it really doing anything? What's another one? Like band work even, like I posted a video just recently the other day and I put it in slow motion. I'm like, I really don't like the way my shoulder was moving. But you couldn't really tell because I was moving hopefully fast. But, when I slowed it down, I'm like, you know what? My shoulder mechanics just wasn't great. I wasn't really happy with that. So, I mean, just things like that where I think because we're moving fast, we have to make sure we own those prerequisites.
Definitely. And I think that goes back to power meaning different things to different people, right? Power for, I don't know, an elderly client might be standing up from a squat faster, right? I don't know. Like we're going to have a lot of different metrics that we're going to use. And I think and you said it, like they're probably the most butchered exercises because people skip too many steps to get there, right? Hence the problems. They throw in the barbells, they're snatching, they're cleaning, they're doing all these types of things. Actually, I said clean. Dumbbell clean, one of my favorite exercises. That was a Boyle thing. He had everybody do dumbbell cleans in the beginning and not worry too much about dealing with a barbell or dealing with a kettlebell. So big fan of that. But yeah, I think we all can agree that the fundamentals of just a regular sound strength and conditioning program are going to have massive impact into the power movements. So if we do those things well, then we could probably get a little bit more in depth with the bounding, the slams, the things that get might look cool, and they do have benefit, right? They're there for a reason. They're great exercises when you do them properly and you have the prerequisites.
Yeah, so speaking of slams, that's one of my favorites that I use a lot, different slam variations. I think talking about power systems, I think a lot of people lack more anterior slamming power or, down the front side of the body. And I think it goes a long way in terms of preventing a lot of loss of posture, early extension problems, is just having that power down the front to counteract the power that you're generating up out of the ground, as we talk about ground reaction force.
One of the things that the TPI power course highlighted on was running, sprinting, kicking, and throwing, which is a skill that, surprisingly, that's a low number of people have. I work with an older population, so even just at a basic level, getting them into the right fundamentals in terms of those three things. I'm not going to have a 70-year-old client run 40-yard sprints, but we can have them, like you were saying, a fast squat up from a chair, give them a med ball from the chest and just have them stand up and throw it to me or against the wall as hard as they can. So that's something that you can develop power safely with an older individual, but still have them doing some of the things that the younger ones are taking advantage of for power.
Yeah, Mike, getting back to your original question, I think for me, it's a lot of, med ball variations. It's a lot of jumping variations, sprinting if possible. But like we said, I think it's important for people to understand that there's different levels of these things. Most of what you're going to see on social media and stuff like that is probably going to be the higher level stuff. And that's stuff that people probably need to work up to. The important thing is to be able to do it with, good technique, good intent, And that can be done at a very simple exercise for something like you guys have mentioned, simple things, and then hopefully working up to those higher level variations that you're probably seeing on the internet. But it still comes down to, for most people, it's running, jumping, throwing, kicking, those kind of things, those athletic moves that are intended to be done quickly.
Kurt, with the running, sprinting, throwing, kicking, your Eagles could probably use some help in all of those categories, right?
They need a lot of that right now. Yes, exactly.
Listen, I'm a Dolphins fan, so I can't say a word, all right? So don't worry about it. Yeah.
Kirk, you guys use a lot of the ballistic balls up there, right? With Ben?
We have I haven't seen us get them out very much yet, but we do have those, yes.
Okay. I was curious
Yeah.
what kind of data you're collecting.
Yeah, none so far that since I've been there, but I have seen them there, and hopefully we'll get to use those at some point soon.
Awesome.
So Mike, this is a big week. This is a big week for you and I then.
That's why I'm talking smack. Come on. Yeah, I know.
Gotcha. I'm finally caught up now.
I need a lot of points, though. I know.
Yeah. Okay.
So guys, what about things like compound training, or I guess sometimes it's called complex training, where you're hitting a strength exercise for like 75, 80% of your max, recruiting a bunch of motor units and whatnot, and then following that up with the same kind of movement with a plyometric exercise of some sort or a power exercise. For me, with my clientele being in this side of the hemisphere, this part of the hemisphere, is like, I kind of save that for more end of the off season, pre-season type thing, and then kind of sprinkle that stuff in season. But I know obviously like with Mike, you probably do that all year round, right? Because you're pretty much in season all year round, right?
Yeah, I mean, a far majority of the time, yes. And haven't like the French now coined this? Isn't it like French contrast training or something like that now, right? Somehow they got their hands on it. But yeah, no, that's a great topic to bring up. I feel like we can definitely go down the rabbit hole with this a little bit. But what are your guys' thoughts on that type of training? I think it could be extremely beneficial, but in the right doses and with the right selection of the exercises.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's just people need to understand when to apply it, who to apply it with, and that it's probably going to be for the higher, the people with a higher training age and are doing more consistent training, that kind of thing. But if you get some folks that are able to do it, it's going to produce some really good results for them.
I'm curious. I've seen a ton of like deadlift, box jump combinations, right? Like what other ones are there that you've seen to be effective?
I like deadlift and broad jump opposed to box jump.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But squat and box jump.
Okay.
Like a lat pull down or a pull up with a med ball slam.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool.
Not so much for golf, but I would do like a back exercise with an overhead kind of toss, but I don't use that too much with my golfers. But
okay, I like those variations. That's cool.
I'll do like chop to a rip trainer combination, or chop or lift.
Okay, cool. Would you do it standing, half kneeling, both?
I did both. Mainly standing though. I'll have them do like 90-degree jumps depending on if they're able to. Kneeling if it's appropriate.
Cool. For those that are watching this on the recording, just so you guys understand what we're talking about. So contrast training, it takes a lot of names, but basically what you're doing, like Nathan mentioned, is you're doing a traditional strength exercise where you're going to recruit a lot of muscles because you're working through a complex movement, and then you go basically directly into power exercise of that same
movement pattern,
biomechanics,
muscle group.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Movement pattern, biomechanics, whatever you want to call it. So again, you would do a deadlift, right? Hip dominant hinge pattern, and then do a broad jump, right? The same pattern in more of an explosive movement. So that's what we're talking about here.
About accommodating resistance. You guys use bands, chains, things like that?
Personally, I don't.
I think everything has its place. we use a lot of bands where I'm at now. And I think they definitely have some benefit. I think they definitely have some drawbacks as well, though.
From an overuse standpoint, or let's say controlling the eccentric, or do you find something else?
Well, I think it's, I guess it depends on if we're talking about just power stuff or just strength stuff as well. Because if you're using bands for strength, sometimes it's hard to get heavy enough bands. And if you do get heavy enough bands, sometimes the variability in resistance is too much. So it starts too easy and gets too heavy by the end of your movement.
Right.
So there's some limitations there. But I think it's good in terms of it does give you some more constant feedback and some, like you're talking about, resistance variability to where you're having to adjust. Sometimes easier to do explosive movements than with a cable machine. If the weights are jumping or something like that, you have to deal with inertia. But yeah, I think every tool has its pros and cons.
I haven't been using a lot of that kind of stuff lately, just because of the folks that I've been dealing with and the folks that I've been mostly working with recently, and kind of their lower training age. I haven't felt that was the right choice for most of our folks right now.
Hold on. How do I do this? There we go. Okay, there we go. He's having a house party over there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, guys.
I like them. Obviously I'm not going to put chains on my population, but in terms of bands, I like to use them for like the compound stuff, deadlifts, squats, presses, pulls, things like that. But, obviously it alters the strength curve a little bit, or evens out the strength curve, I guess. So you can kind of build that speed to go, as you're driving up into the band, as the band gets a little bit more resistance on it. But it all comes down to intent, and obviously you can't coach that from a new person. It has to be somebody who's been training for a while, who knows how to lift properly and can create that speed, right? But at the same time, I like it. I think it's from a band standpoint, I kind of like you can do them both. Reverse band method too is kind of nice, just for the eccentric side of it, to build that resilient tissue before we hit a power phase. But yeah, it's definitely, you got to kind of select your population wisely.
I just want to throw some chains around my neck so I look like a badass when I'm working out.
Good.
All right, hold on,
Like
Jonathan.
Mr. T in the gym.
Exactly. All right, Jonathan, you back with us?
Yeah, back with you. Sorry about that.
All right, no, you're good.
It's chaos.
Yeah.
We're good. Alrighty. So the last thing that I have kind of on my notes that I want to touch on, and we did a little bit before, is maybe kind of coming up with more of a concrete set of like, here are the different ways that you can improve power, right? Just giving people like several options. And I think from the non-fitness side, we identified a few. So proper club fitting, kinematic or swing sequence, hitting the ball in the center of the club face. Darren, am I forgetting any of those from the golf side of things?
No.
Okay, so
Maybe timing of ground forces.
Okay, so yeah, diving into a little bit more ground force. So there's a bucket of golf instruction / technique ways that we can improve power. And then how else would you quantify the things that we talked about tonight? Like prerequisites maybe, or just like having appropriate mobility would definitely be one.
Yeah, I think getting screened, right? Like,
yes, there you go. Yeah.
knowing what your deficiencies are.
Sure. That's the big umbrella, right? That's the overarching thing. Definitely. Is understanding what the hell you need to work on. So that's absolutely the number one thing that you should be doing, is to go and work with a professional, probably on the golf side and on the fitness side, to say, hey, listen, here's your restrictions and here's what we can go ahead and attack. Good point. Thank you. What else am I forgetting?
I think was it Chris last time who was talking about this? If you guys can maybe fill in the blanks here if I get it wrong, but if somebody comes in who is strong but has very slow club head speed, that's easy for us to work with. But if somebody comes in with a lot of club head speed but not very strong, that's kind of a recipe for injury, I believe. Again, the braking system is probably just not there. I can't remember if that was last call or a call prior to that, but do you guys remember that conversation at all?
Yeah, he had a couple categories
Yeah.
that he divided people into. But yeah, those were kind of the biggest ones.
Yeah. There was 3 in total, I think he had.
There
But
was
yeah,
three.
yeah. But those were the 2 big ones. I think the third one was where they just sucked at everything. No.
Like Mike.
Hey. Oh man. So yeah, I think we could throw the whole braking system deceleration as another component into how to develop power. And then kind of the meat and potatoes part would be just train the way that you're supposed to train, right? Develop a strong base, build strength, do compound movements, whether you want to get more advanced in doing stuff like contrast training, like we talked about, but just having that understanding of getting your base, your foundation as strong as you possibly can just opens up the ceiling for you to do so much more. And if you skip those steps, it's hard as hell to go back and say, all right, here's what I need to do to work on myself again. Because we're all, like Brian said before, we don't want to work on that stuff, right? And even us as coaches, I'm sure we've all made that mistake before where we've skipped too many steps with a client and we're like, oh crap, right? Now I have to tell them that we have to go back because I messed up, right? So yeah, I just want people to be able to watch this and say, okay, this is all awesome information, right? These guys are telling me to do all this crazy stuff, but like, here's what I can do. So yes, get assessed, right? Figure out your swing sequence to make sure things are going well. But when it comes to the gym, train solid foundational strength-based movements. And then when you have that, then you could get fancy with it and do some of the exercises that we talked about before.
Yeah. And me personally, I don't recommend anybody get into like super speed training until you do those steps.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just me. And
yeah.
I modify some of the super speed protocols because I think it's a lot of swings.
Yep. Definitely something.
So what's your protocol then?
So I don't. They progress it into like phase 1. It's 5 swings. It ends up being like 40 plus swings. I'll break it down 2, 3 max each direction, and then we're moving on to the next weight. And I wouldn't say I go through the whole protocol. I'll either do just the square stance or the step protocols, 2 to 3 each side, and that's it. So it's maybe 18 swings max. Otherwise, I just think it's too much.
And this is something we're definitely going to have another talk all on this, by the way. But go ahead.
I think that kneeling is a little bit too much for most people. It's a little bit too much stress.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Yeah,
I would agree.
And we have members of our mastermind that can speak very highly into this category. So we will be definitely doing a very detailed talk on super speed and overtraining protocols and stuff. So, yeah, what else, guys? Anything else you want to talk about that we forgot that you want to touch on when it comes to power?
You guys use any kind of velocity-based apps or tech?
We've done some stuff with push bands, and we have a 1080 motion that can do a lot of different weighting and things like that. But we've done a little bit of testing with push band, like Darren mentioned, we have some of the ballistic balls. So we've tried to dabble in some of that stuff a little bit. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
It's my Christmas list. I want one.
Yeah, I think that sort of gets into, again, maybe a little bit higher level thinking with some of this stuff too, and whether people need to whether there's sort of I've heard the sort of the gorilla and the kangaroo analogy where whether they need to focus more on creating more speed or whether they need to focus on creating more strength. And I think that gets back into that assessment process of one of the things we looked at with our juniors is not only how much force or how much power they will produce, but was it coming more from, are they generating that more from a force standpoint, or are they generating it more from a speed standpoint, and then trying to figure out where we should focus their training based on their particular needs.
Gorilla and the kangaroo. I haven't heard that one before.
Love that.
Something like that. I might have been 2 completely different animals, but I think it was on that same spectrum. So.
Oh, good deal.
Or maybe I just started something. Who knows?
It sounded convincing. That's all that matters, right? It
sounded smart. That's good.
I was on board.
Okay, good.
Oh, man. Everybody else, anything else you want to add? We're good? All right, cool.
Good.
So, oh, good?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, no, I was just gonna say, awesome. For those that are watching, obviously we've recorded this, but yeah, we're gonna continue to do these throughout the year. We're gonna be putting together a webinar series with similar topics, a little bit more specific topics, where a couple of us are gonna hop on and just teach about a specific area of golf fitness, and we're gonna keep that rolling as we head into the new year. So please stay tuned for more information from us in the mastermind group. There's gonna be a lot more coming your way. So thank you.